Welcome to the Leadership by Design podcast, where thoughtful leaders share lessons from their journey. I'm Dave Adams, founder of the Business Freedom Group, and today we're very pleased to have Brooke Schoenfeld from Resiliant. Welcome, Brooke, and I'd love to start off with you telling our audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, and the journey that brought you here.
Okay, well, thank you. If for years I told everyone the one job in cybersecurity I don't want is Chief Information Security Officer. So here I am, CISO for Resiliant.
Right.
And sometimes you're sort of the last person standing or the only person with enough experience and enough breadth and depth to take the position and do the work. And so I find myself in the position, not just CISO for Resiliant, but we also offer virtual CISO services to some of our clients. So I'm CISO for about 4 companies. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
The funny thing about this whole cybersecurity tangent, if you will, now more than 25 years, is that it started by accident. I was a chief designer, one of 2 chief designers at a software house, Infosys Incorporated. And I also wrote TCP/IP stacks down to the hardware, so I knew about networking. So the head of engineering came and said, "Hey, Brooke, can you do something? We've got this router. It goes to the internet." This is back in like 98. Since you write networking stuff, can you configure the router? We have to change our access stuff, what we call access control lists, but ACLs. Can you change those? Can you configure those? We've been having this person come in who's very expensive consultant to do it. And, if you could do it, that would save us a little money. Sure, no problem. And there begins my descent. I quickly realized people were poking at the outside and that I'd better learn something about attacks.
Right.
Now, that wasn't my first incident. We had an earlier incident a number of years before that I had to deal with where I literally had to put the operating system jump table back together in a hexadecimal debugger because that was the only way to get rid of the worm that somebody brought in. So it wasn't my first incident. It wasn't the first time we talked about security, but it wasn't part of my jobs really. And from there, can you manage our demilitarized zone on our web server? Can you bring up a VPN because the CEO wants to move to Oregon or spend time in Oregon and VPN in? Sure, I can do all those things. Pretty soon I learned I better learn something about this. So as time went on, I got certified as number 144 GIAC intrusion detection analyst and started taking seriously, found some really interesting bugs, started to descend into the realm of security. This is really important and I don't understand. So I gotta learn. So Cisco realized that there weren't very many people in security at that time, right around 1999, 2000, who had design background and they were building an security architecture practice. So they asked me to come over and join them. And therein starts my real education because I got there and I thought, I'm a certified intrusion detection analyst and I've been dealing with hexadecimal and bytes and bits and all kinds of CPU things and interrupts and all these very deep kind of things, hardware, whatever. I know what I'm doing. And the moment people like Steve Atchison and Michelle Gell opened their mouth, I realized that I knew nothing about security. I used to take public transport to the office in San Jose because I lived in Berkeley. And I read the first edition of Hacking Exposed, Stuart McClure's first edition of that book, cover to cover, trying to understand each thing so I could finally come up to speed with these brilliant practitioners. I felt like a complete idiot. I refused to open my mouth in those meetings because I was so little I knew comparatively. Sure, they didn't have the design experience I had. They didn't have all of this other stuff that I had, behind me. But there were things in security they were talking about. And I was like, oh, what are they talking about? I don't know. So, time goes on. I eventually was the technical lead for Cisco's application and infrastructure, web application and infrastructure team, which later grew to be one of the most important teams when I first started being Cisco, InfoSec's very first, I was application security architect. I was there very first because I had all this development and design background that other people didn't have. And so, at that time, it wasn't a very important position, but quickly attackers moved up the stack to applications and our team became very important. And so, therein lies the journey.
So for me, the first leadership lesson is keep learning. Always, right? Your journey from Infosys into Cisco, and then you made a stop in at Autodesk before going over to McAfee, right? You've had quite a storied journey, but the keep learning theme is what I'm getting here.
And I mean, with the advent of AI, believe me, I'm reading a deep book with all the mathematics on how you train. It's been read now. I think I understand. I hope I understand. But in order to keep up, technology is moving all the time. And being of an engineering mind, I'm always nervous to be talking about things I don't understand well enough. So yeah, with the advent of AI, I picked up a machine learning book written by a professor at MIT and got down and dirty with the calculus and said, okay, I think I get it. And that was just recently. Of course, we're always learning. And that's the thing about leadership. It really is important, Dave. I'm constantly delving into what is the nature of humans? What is the nature of when we come together and work? My spouse just sent me a wonderful clip, and I haven't had time to see the whole thing, but he starts it saying, it's not about controlling people. It's about dealing with the messy reality of everybody's family ghosts and families of origin, what they believe and how they believe the world should work, how it actually works, their great strengths, their limitations and challenges, including my own. If something's dysfunctional in your group, physician, heal thyself first. Go look in the mirror and see if you're doing something, I'm doing something that's at least contributing, if not causing the dysfunction or the weirdness, so that I can be, as with my limitations and incapabilities and all of that stuff that we bring to everywhere we go, and especially at work where sometimes the stakes are high. I get there and I try to go look in the mirror and say, okay, it could be me. What am I doing to contribute to this? And how can I shift way before I go and look? And I think about another piece of that, of course, is the hard piece of feedback. And we should come back to that, I think. When you have someone who's not functioning well,
yeah,
what do? You really got to confront it. You can't ignore it. And those things can spread out into your team and start affecting everyone really deeply when one person is not contributing well enough. And
let me connect what you're saying right now to something you said earlier. You owned well that at some point you didn't want to speak up in meetings because you didn't feel like you were at the same level as the other people. At some point, though, I'll bet you cured yourself of that to realize that even from a modeling standpoint, being willing to ask about something you don't know about encourages other people to do the same.
That's so important, Dave. One of the interesting pieces about building a team, it's a piece of the puzzle I really love, is being just vulnerable enough to make it safe to be vulnerable, remembering that your team is not your therapy session. If you need therapy, go hire a therapist and take it there. Do not bring it to work, right? Boundaries are really important, but just enough. And what are the key 5 words? I'm sorry, I was wrong. That's amazing when a leader who has skills and, you make it safe enough for one of your team to challenge you. I literally, with that web application and infrastructure team called, affectionately WebArt at Cisco. I don't know if it still is, but it was for years. Everybody was pretty new, and I knew more about security and certainly application security than anybody else. And so people were afraid to challenge me, and they were waiting for me to be boss.
Right.
And that's not the way I like to work. Believe me, I will make a decision if I need to, but I prefer to really, see what the group can offer me and offer our work if I can. But then we can talk about decision paralysis too. That's dangerous as well. But nevertheless, I'm sitting there and nobody's willing to challenge me because I knew more. and had more. So I literally brought on my dear friend Uwe Hansen, who'd been in security for 14 years. He hadn't done application security, so that was new for him. So he was learning. But I brought him because I knew he wouldn't hesitate to go, I don't think so, Brooke. I don't think that's right. And I wanted people to see how gracefully I would say, oh, thanks for telling me that. And you have to model that.
Yeah.
So that everyone else can go, I can not only challenge Brooke, I can be wrong here and nothing happens except we solve the problem. Nothing happens. I don't get in trouble. I don't lose my bonus. I don't lose. You have to model all that stuff to make it safe enough so that the team will feel. And what happens is that's the basis of trust that builds the synergy we're looking for.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing to me. I'm an engineer, and whenever I talk to other technical leaders, it's the human part that really makes a difference between a team that goes somewhere and a team that gets stuck.
Coming back to the feedback piece, one or, with lack of enough integrity can really despoil a great team.
Right.
Or as in the case, and I'm not going to name names here because these people are friends of mine, but a couple of couples were in the original WebArc, and one of them was having a serious into the office really loudly and difficultly, and having, rather major dramas. And that rippled out through the entire team, and my heart goes out to anyone. Relationships are hard, especially romantic ones. I have no judgment here. But that sort of stuff, you have to address it. You can't ignore it because it ripples way beyond, okay, we're in this small team, but the ripples in the office go out and out and out and out. One person was asked to find another position so that the stuff was broken up.
Right.
And then, things were shifted around. Yes, you have to deal. You really have to deal. And those things are hard. I don't know a leader, not a good one, who enjoys that part of the job when you've got to say to someone, look, you're not really working out on this team. Can we help you find a place that you're more suited to? That's how you go about these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's hard for many leaders to step in gracefully rather than avoid, overreact.
Yeah. I mean, you just got to be watching. You've got to, we had a fella, he was really good. You give him a list of tasks, really clear, and he would follow those tasks and it would all be done on time, under budget. Mostly like check mark kind of things. He would have made a great auditor.
Right.
But security architecture is problem solving and thinking about problems and working with negotiations and compromise and risk assessment. Is it really that big? Should I make it smaller? Then I've got to, all of these different pieces that are very watery, in fact, and require someone to really have enough confidence to step outside of this task is this deliverable, write this down, make this,
Right.
And he was just not suited to the work. And we had to eventually ask him to find another role that was more suited to him. And you really got to deal with that because it drags the rest of the team down and also if they can't do the job, you might end up with something that might be a catastrophe. And I want to tell a little story about, there was a little catastrophe. Somebody was a partner organization was really mad, a vice president, really mad at us over things that didn't get done well enough because this person missed something important. Some things important. John and I were preparing, John Stewart, and I said, John, it's my fault. I lead this team. And this is a great leader. I just want to tell you, John said, no, Brooke, InfoSec is mine. It's my fault. That's a real lesson for all of us to always remember that when we're a leader, we are taking responsibility, even if we didn't do the work. We're taking responsibility for the results of what happens.
And I find the really fabulous leaders find a way to make all the successes the team's credit, and they on their shoulders are willing to take the oops, the failures.
That's wonderful and really important. The classic, you praise in public, and we don't do that enough. Our culture, I think, is reticent for praise. So I've trained myself and I never lie. It's always something real. But, people smell a lie a million miles away. So you don't want to make it up. But whenever I see something that's successful, everyone knows, and I make sure that I get around to everybody on the team, and they're all producing and all getting a little attention in public, so you're not just focusing on one person who's a star or whatever. And at the same time, feedback, I'm going to call it feedback as opposed to critique, happens in private.
Yeah.
100%, and not ganging up. Oh, the two of us are going to grab you. No, no, no. You got to face the bullet. You gotta face the gun, as it were. Solo, I take a deep breath and I remember that whatever is heard and whatever is said and how angry or defensive the other person is, I'm just doing my best to try and make the work better. And and that's what it's about. And I never make it personal.
Now, we've been focusing on what some people might call cultural, team spirit, etc., which I think is, a key determinant of outcomes. But let me shift you for a moment, because that's kind of the how things get done, right? On the what to do, more the strategy side. What are your experiences for to determine what direction you and your team should go in?
Business drivers are ultimately the deciders of what's important or not. Now, remembering that I do cybersecurity, and if we're hacked or we can't deliver our services, that's kind of important, and that's part of the business drivers.
Right.
And I think it's important for security people always to remember that security isn't some non-functional thing on the side that makes the security person happy. It's got to be a driver of the business. Let me use an example. I assume that you and many of your listeners use online banking.
Sure.
Well, I assume you assume that the bank has done all it can to prevent anyone unauthorized from looking at your account details, from hiding those even from its own administrators and IT people. And of course, you authenticate and you authorize. Those are two different things, by the way, to your account, so that you can see your details and manipulate your funds or whatever, and whatever you need to do. And those are security functions, right?
Right.
That's functional. That's part of the business. There is no bank, there is no online banking without authentication and authorization, period. Boom, you're done. And so I use those as examples of things that A, are essential controls that you expect, and B, have to be designed in. They're not something you just get for free by secure coding. You have to decide to set up authentication and authorization. Luckily, there are great services that do that for you. So that's a little bit of transferring the risk to someone else. But still, you have to set that up and you have to make it go. So business is the driver. Ultimately, what does the business need? What is the security posture we need to maintain in order for our business to be successful, knowing that we live in a world of high attack and great danger out on the public internet? I liken it to the days of the golden age of piracy. It was just so easy to sail a ship out there, grab a merchantman who wasn't well armed, and go "arr" in their face and say, "Give me all the stuff in your hold, or we're gonna enslave you all," and or worse. And so the merchantman goes, "Yeah, take it. I'd rather be able to still have some food and be able to sail my ship into harbor." It's important to realize that our commons today, one of the big ones, is the internet, and it's global and it's open to everyone. And there be pirates out there on them waters, matey. Lots of them.
I've got some experience in the world of machine reliability. And one of the things that we would have to do is we would have to go through and say, what's the actual probability that this machine is going to blow up or break out into fire or throw a bearing and take the plant down or whatever? So at some point in the cybersecurity world, I'm sure you have to kind of go through a risk versus reward thought process of it, how probable is this risk? Because you could spend your life chasing things that will never happen, versus you really want to invest in the ones that are likely to happen. So how do you think through those risk versus reward?
It's called threat modeling.
Threat modeling. Very good.
Yes, there's a term for it. The term was coined in the late 1940s. I actually did an Ngram search of this in English, at least, to figure out when did we start talking about threat modeling. And it came to mean something around computers in the early 1980s. Before that, it was used through the word threat model was largely, it was intelligence and geopolitical and military, as well as used in lots of things you wouldn't imagine, like sociology and psychology and criminology, threat
Hmm.
modeling. But
Right.
it's come to be associated strongly with cybersecurity. And there's a practice of threat modeling, of which I've written a couple of books, and some of my best friends have written a bunch of other really great ones. And the idea is we want to focus, exactly as you said, on that which has a higher probability, not just of occurring, but having impacts that are important. Let me give you an example. You have a vulnerability that allows an attacker to come to your public website and download in some other fashion other than HTTP or HTTPS, the standard method, go to the drive and just suck up all the public files, but they're public. Do you care about this vulnerability versus something that might hurt your customers
Right.
or something that allows control of and leaking of proprietary things? Those are much more important. And there are just gradients and gradients and gradients. So we balance things like how easy or hard is it to exploit, how well known is the exploitation. If it's not known at all, and it would require a whole bunch of research, but we know about it, then we know that we have some time to fix it, even if it's dreadful, because nobody knows about it yet. Now that could change tomorrow, in which
Right.
case we'll change our priorities here. But the moment you might have some grace period to fix something, whether it's easy to fix or hard to fix. There are all these different dimensions that we look at. There's a practice here, and it's the foundational piece for building your security posture. Because we don't have unlimited funds, as you said. We want to focus on that which has significant impact and probability of being exploited, and we can come up with some ratings of those. I dare not say risk here, because in order to actually calculate risk and you probably know this, but maybe the audience doesn't, without actuarial tables,
Sure.
is actually requires some sophisticated mathematics. I'm completely in favor of using those mathematics when you have time and effort to set it up, and you have to set it up well, because it involves finding the right variables and getting their ranges. It's non-trivial. And so in the absence of that, we need some rating things that are sound and built on good risk, but I would never call that a risk. I would call it a rating or a
Right.
priority, because
Right.
I want to reserve the word risk for something very particular. Nevertheless, we do have to know what's more important. You must know. And again, there's a risk tolerance. There's a risk tolerance. Every organization has different tolerances for different things. So I like to give the example of if your customers are really, really important to you, a vulnerability such as something called a cross-site scripting, and security people will know what that means, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know it. What you need to know is it harms your customers. The attacker comes to your website and harms your customers. Now, if you value your customers and your whole business is built on the idea of hanging on to your customers year after year after year and having them, you don't want to have a population of them who said, golly, I went to your website and now my bank account's empty. That's really bad for your business.
Right.
On the other hand, if you run a business, and I'm not saying this is integrity, this is very low integrity, but I can imagine a business where I'm going to see each customer just once and I think of them as suckers. So I don't care if I have cross-site scripting errors, because so what? I'm not going to see them again. They buy the thing once, I make my millions, I'm gone. So maybe you don't care. So there are different levels of tolerance for different kinds of things. And we can't do the threat model in order to come out with what's important unless we know this business can tolerate this risk more and we're willing to take that risk. And if that happens, we have some other things we'll do, but we can't tolerate this risk at all, right? You have to know that. And that's a piece of the puzzle that I think threat modelers don't, it doesn't get talked about enough. And in terms of leadership, it's a place where I have not just taken leadership at the various places you named them that I've worked, but in the industry. I've spoken a lot about this. I've tried to teach it. I've tried to give people methods and build methods that are rapid but successful, because you have to have all the pieces or you're just shooting in the dark. And when we're just shooting in the dark, we're guessing, and guessing is very expensive.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to point out, especially for the mechanical crowd who might be listening in, I find it's always very interesting that the vocabulary between various areas of leadership, you just have to make a bridge, because in the mechanical area, reliability modeling does exactly what you're talking about for threat modeling in the cybersecurity area. And the safety folks would have their own vocabulary for this, but they're all, kind of consistent frameworks. We're running out of time a little bit. What would be one piece of advice you would give to every business leader, an actionable step in the next 90 days that they should do to continue advancing on their leadership journey?
Leader, know thyself. I mean, seriously, and I'll use myself as an example. I'm quite right-brained, which makes me a great architect. Seeing spatial and those types of relationships is trivial for me. And working through algebraic steps is a little bit more struggle for me. I'm not the most organized person, so I love my project managers. Knowing those things and knowing my limitations has helped me tremendously be a better leader, because I don't try to be the great, perfectly organized person in the world. I need a project manager or a program manager, and I ask them to help me remember what was important and what I was supposed to get done this week. And what deliverables do I have, and help me stay on track without necessarily controlling my life, because I'm a little weaker there. I always forget which steps come first in basic algebra. I have studied it dozens of times, and I get it wrong because I forget, and I guess I just don't use it enough. And it's good to know thyself enough to know where to go to make up for our limitations. Whereas the other side of that is, because I'm very fast and I look at a diagram and I really understand the relationships very quickly, perhaps much quicker than other people who are more left-brained, I also need to be patient with people who are a little slower, and not be expecting everyone to just get it, to look at the diagram and go, oh yeah, uh-huh. And remember, I've looked at thousands of architectures.
Right.
Thousands. And so, yes, you get very fast. I'm already good at that, and I've gotten a lot faster because I have so much background. And you have to remember, wait a minute, slow down.
Well, that's a great trifecta you just gave us there. Know thyself, ask for help, and be patient. Thank you. So, it's been a real pleasure, Brooke. And to our listeners, thanks again for tuning in to Leadership by Design, to keep your thinking fresh with lessons from thoughtful leaders like Brooke. We'll see you next time.